like Fort Peck Rural Water, your rural water there with Tammy Metz and Waz, Buford Trenton Irrigation. It's basically the pallid sturgeon recovery efforts of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Corps of Engineers. They were sued to do something over and above what intake, the $50 million intake dam bypass that they put in, which in the last year they said was very successful. Sturgeon going up there and going up towards Miles City and that Tongue River and Powder River to spawn. But the court ruling said they had to try something on Fort Peck, and so they want to pretend that the dam isn't there. They want to have a spring rise that simulates the snowpack runoff from the plains, which is in May, and then it goes back down, and then it goes back up through June, just past the 4th of July. Started out at about 35,000, which has probably only been reached a couple times in that time frame since the dam was put in 1940 is kind of when it was closed. We got them down to 23 or 24,000. They were going to drop it down to 4,000, which would have left most pump sites high and dry. We got them up to 8. We'd like 10. But in the letter, I don't know if Bull passed it on, but in the record of decision, it quotes right in there, the Corps of Engineers does not have any monetary obligation for any damages, whether it be WADs or irrigators or rural water at Fort Peck. They don't have, no, it says no compensatory mitigation is required as part of the recommended plan. And the recommended plan was alternative 1, which is what I just talked about. So the intent of the whole thing, they think, is to test if by doing this rise, it'll convince the sturgeon to go up from the confluence up to Fort Peck to spawn. Slowing it down, hopefully they will float down the Lake Sakakawea and become sturgeons. The thing to remember on the sturgeon is when they hatch, it takes about 2 weeks, depending on temperature, for them to be able to swim. So in other words, they're like throwing a baby in the water, and for 2 weeks, all they do is float. And if they quit floating like they do at Trenton, when they hit Sakakawea, they sink and they die in the mud. Personally, I think most of us feel that slowing the river down a little bit isn't going to change that. So that's where we're at. We've kind of been negotiating, getting the flow down, get on the up end and getting it raised on the lower end. But we're up against the wire of how do we fix these pump sites in July, August, when the river goes back down. Right now, if you go out in the spring, generally we can get a contractor to go out there with a track, go carefully open up these pump sites so you can get water to them. A lot of them have a little backwater area the pumps are sitting in, or they need to have some silt that's developed. And the ground is kind of dry on top because it's been dry all winter. But once you saturate that for a month or so, like in the test flow, there isn't a contractor around who's going to put his track out there in the river and sink out of sight. So we've kind of been researching. I think Bo has some pictures there, or could get some. These trackles that are designed out in Louisiana, there's 2 companies that make them. We need a couple of those to get out there and help these producers keep irrigating. Otherwise, you all know where July 4th gets, it gets hot and it gets dry and the crops are big. They need a lot of water. And we do have a conservation dredge that needs some retrofitting that could be used on some of them. But Montana has about 150 some pump sites. We've got permits on all of them with the Corps of Engineers to do repair work, so it isn't one of these things that we have to wait 6 months or a year. They're ready to go, shovel ready if we need to fix them. That was just approved this past December. And in North Dakota, you've got like Chaldees there at across the river at Cartwright. You've got Buford Trenton, and you've got WAS that all probably would be able to use this. Any other irrigators, Paulson's, whoever are up and down that Missouri or the very end of the Yellowstone. So I'm here for any questions. I do appreciate you guys taking the interest. This is really, really big that we can get 2 states working together. And we can't back up on the 800-page EIS, but we can We gotta make it work, and they spend roughly on that called sturgeon recovery about $18 million. They told me yesterday it was 17.45 million in 2024, and we feel there's gotta be some way they can take a couple $1 million or $1.5 million and buy a couple of these floating tracos and give operating money so conservation districts and people like you can keep your irrigators going. I'm here for questions as long as you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Iverson. So I visited with him a little bit yesterday, and these are just some notes that I put together of, that basically looking for support for funding to purchase a specialized floating excavators, which if you look through any of those documents I sent yesterday, that's where those pictures would be at. Funding to upgrade the conservation district's dredge to be more effective in making repairs to those pump sites. But what are your guys?
Letter of support from us, funding, is that coming from the Corps, you're saying? Okay.
What, Mr. Iverson, what would be, when are they looking to start the test flow? So like, obviously, would we have 2 weeks to do some research for this letter, or does it need to be sooner than later?
They plan to do it this spring, so it would start probably in May. And that depends somewhat on the snowpack. They needed water in Fort Peck up on the gates because they want to release the water off the top of the dam through the spillway. So right today, they have enough water to do that in Fort Peck. So this, it would be this spring. Originally, we didn't think there was going to be water, but somehow they got enough water in Fort Peck to do that. So. And this is going to occur probably 7 or 8 times in the next 10, 15 years. That's the range they use. So just say every other year it's going to happen.
Is there still consideration from the Corps of what their plan is if it doesn't work? If they can't get the eggs to go far enough down into Lake Sakakawea, what the next plan is?
Well, that's why it's called a test flow. If the Corps, if this doesn't work, they would abandon it, realizing that you can't make that river longer just by slowing it down. And then I imagine they would then go back up into the Yellowstone near Miles City and work on those little dams, like the Powder River Dam or Tongue River Dam and Powder River. Go up, there's a dam further up from Miles City that they'd put a bypass on. So this is a test flow, which means we're the experiment. And I can't hear the people talking, Bo, other than you. So just if there's a question, just go ahead and repeat it.
Okay.
So are they, Bo, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I wasn't too sure if I was muted or not, but, so when they do this, they're gonna increase the flow to 22,000 and I forget now, for how long of a period does they plan on flowing that hard?
Okay, that's the second bump in the flow. That's going to start about the 10th of May, let's say, and it'll go through the 10th of July. Then they ramp it down to that 8,000. So it's going to be a month. And there will be some pump sites a little bit in trouble then. For instance, we have 2 pump sites on our farm that we prepared back in 2006 when they were going to do it. It was called the Spring Rise then, and they never did it. Some people have prepared their pump sites to take that higher flow. But yeah, your question is yes, until about the 10th of July.
A question here is, Mr. Iverson, what would the elevation of the river be with that test flow?
The river? It depends on where you're at. There's gauging stations all up and down the river. Let me look here. I don't know what it would be at Williston. It's in the EIS.
So
they have a cutoff point. That's one of the cutoff things. Is the river can't get. It's got to be so many feet below the flood stage at Williston on that levee. but I don't have that number in front of me. It's in the EIS.
For reference, though, you said there's only two other
22
times the
feet.
Missouri River has flowed at over 35,000 cubic feet. One of them was just recently. What, do you remember what years those were?
2011, it flowed, like they say, a 500-year storm at about 100,000 at Culbertson, up a little bit. 1977, I believe, it ran over the spillway. They had to open the gates. They hadn't opened them in close to 35 years. And then it happened once, I believe, to test them way back in the 40s sometime that they had to open those gates. The problem in 11, what happened, and again in 77, is there was like a couple $100 million worth of work done on the spillway when they use it. It works real good until it drops off the edge of the spillway and it creates a huge cavern, eats underneath of it. So the cost to us irrigators is probably small compared to what they're going to do when they have to repair that spillway each time.
So our chairman, sorry, this is Steve. I just got a question. I went to the public comment or public hearing that they had at the ARC. I believe you were there as well. But when the Corps was suggesting that this is something that's happened before, that's what we're speaking to, right? I mean, this is not.
Well, and we argue with them on that. If I could interrupt, we argue with them on
Yep.
that statement. They say, you have seen these flows in recent years. Okay, yes, 3 years ago, it got up to 28,000, but it was in April, early April. Nobody was irrigating. The ground was froze. So I tell them, quit saying that to people because it's convincing that, well, you've seen this. Well, I don't know if you remember a few years ago, maybe 3, there was an ice jam up here at Culbertson, and the river did back up. It went up 6 feet. We have one pump site where they do some water on our place. They do some water marketing. It went up 6 feet in about 6 hours. But yeah, it has been up that high, but it hasn't been during the irrigation season of May, June through September.
Okay.
And I wasn't
And
able to make that Williston meeting. I had COVID that day and I just couldn't go.
And that may be, you know, if it's a natural occurrence, there's not much you can do about Mother Nature, but we don't need to do it to ourselves on purpose.
No, and the thing to remember, they always say, well, this is kind of natural. 1940, that dam was put in, and so everybody, including Williston and Beaufort Trent and all these people, have designed pump sites and irrigation around a river that was controlled. There's no other way to put it. Unless you take Fort Peck out, it's a controlled river. So there is nothing natural about the Missouri from Fort Peck to Sakakawea.
That's what's one of the most heavily controlled rivers on the continent.
That's right, and I mean, there was a lot of good reasons to put it in. Probably it kept Williston from being flooded all the way down to New Orleans, to Mississippi, and it was, and that's a long story you don't want to get into today, but the Fick-Sloan Act that authorized all the Missouri River dams, they promised, you guys know about the Garrison diversion, all that stuff. They promised a lot of stuff that didn't happen, and now the few irrigators that were able to get going on their own, now they're putting us in jeopardy.
So, if I may, Mr. Iverson, I know that at one time the discussion from the Corps was that if the test flow did not work, then the only other way to get the eggs to float further down to the river is make sure that the elevation of Lake Sakakawea is low enough to get that flow further down the river, correct?
That's correct, because you have that dead zone at Trenton, whether you like it or not, that's what it is. It's low water and it's low in oxygen. And I bring that up not to poke a needle with a bear of North Dakota, but North Dakota, I have to hand it to them, your state engineer and whatnot, has really been good at saying, no, we're going to keep Sakakawea up. And so, yeah, Sakakawea is an excellent resource for you guys. And that would, and I don't know how low, I don't know if they've ever studied it, how low that dam would have to be to add another 5 or 10 miles to that free flow. And I don't even know if that would work, because you'd still have a mud flat out there that, who knows if it would work. But yeah, you're right, Bo.
So I guess for our consideration is, I think, you know, as, Williams County, that we need to consider, issuing a letter of support for funding from the Corps for the issues that are going to be created, from this test flow. I guess, what are the thoughts from the board? Barry, Steve, any thoughts from you guys?
Who would own those pieces of equipment then?
Well, if I'll just interject, this is Dick Iverson. What we did with the dredge, we were able to get some money from the state of Montana and the local conservation district. I think, I guess that's all up to the people involved, like you guys in the districts. I would say, let the conservation districts own them. It's multi-state. Even your district could be involved. And then have at least, like we do the dredge, to a private contractor that has staff and knowledge to do it. Districts, it's hard for them to hire a person to do this kind of work. It's going to be sort of high tech getting out there in the river with the crackle that floats. So let a private contractor that's qualified lease it, and then let a conservation district or two manage it. Kind of be the banker or the person, you know, manage it.
So would it be appropriate if we, had a motion to pursue a letter of support for, local conservation districts, or, and then, but to study it for a couple weeks, get something together, and then approve at the next meeting? Lindsay
Are
kind
you
of had
asking me,
a
Bo, or the
grimace.
board?
I think, Dick, if you have any comments, go ahead. Board members also.
Well, I was just going to say, if you were, that EIS seems intimidating, but it's pretty easy to go through that PDF that was attached to that letter. And it has a lot of charts and numbers and tables and the dollars by county, and I think the two in North Dakota are in there possibly. Well, I don't know if they did. We argued about that. We wanted them to include North Dakota, but it has the 4 counties in Montana. And for instance, Richland County, it's like 355,000 per farm that's affected of loss, and it's roughly $3.1 million to the county of lost revenue. So they have it broke down pretty good. Total of $7 million in those 4 counties alone lost in each test flow, they figured. The other thing that you could maybe put in your letter is, just this morning I got 2 emails from the Corps. We're working with them, helping them find these pump sites they want to monitor. We begged them, and they finally are going to monitor during the test flow pump sites. And so we're helping them locate the landowners and who to call. And it might be, a lot of these are out-of-state owners now, but we're helping them chase down the operator and the kid, the uncle or the nephew that's running it. So we're working with the Corps. It isn't like we're just, you know, throwing up a lawsuit. We're trying to work with them, and I think that's the tone that I would encourage you on your letters. We're working with them. We just need the Corps to work with us a little more.
Have you had any collaboration with McKenzie County?
No, the only thing is during a year or so ago, during the the EIS, when they were doing the public comment and all that, the Buford Trenton Irrigation was very active. Tyler Cheldy on the south side, but no, not on the counties. I did work with McKenzie some. We went over, I think you were there. Yeah, you were there, Bo. We went over and presented to their conservation district, Dana Berwick and I and you, some of the effects and whatnot. So yeah, I guess to say we did meet with their district, and there was about 30 people at that meeting that day. And Tammy Tammy Madsen has been has met personally in the last week or two with Holden, and I forget your representative, but she's really been working hard, because she's up against the wall too, letting contracts, and then the contractor doesn't know if he can get out there and work on that stuff.
Does your group have a letter of support that we could read and go through and approve for signing? Maybe that would be
No, we just have, you could use ours, as an example, just say, you support it. The one we have is Missouri River Council, which is all the conservation districts along the Missouri River from basically Bozeman down to the North Dakota border. But, we didn't feel the chain letter was the way to go, that you can definitely use anything out of ours that you want.
Lindsay, do you have any thoughts for us?
So yesterday we did reach out to Tammy Madsen as well, and WAS is still collecting data and information to understand what their impacts would be. And then I also reached out and sent the documents to Katie Ogden from Lewis and Clark State Park, just since they're along the lake as well. So I think what you're just trying to get at is whether or not the county would provide a letter, and then what the contents of that letter are, and if we have until the next meeting to put that together would be your intention, right? I mean, there's a couple of different things to look at in terms of obviously what Dick has presented, and then anything that WAS or Lewis and Clark may come up with as well. Right.
One other thing, this is Dick, I'd like to interject, is that Senator Holden and our Senator Tester are on that appropriations committee that the Corps goes up to when they need funding. So we do have, out of the 20 people on that committee, we do have 2 that are on that.
And that's why I think, if there's a implication for funding from the Corps to help these conservation districts fix this when they do it, I feel like that's the avenue that we have, that hopefully we can reach out to those offices and say, hey, we need to continue to work with the Corps. The Corps needs to fund the repair, either equipment and operating funding. But thoughts, David?
No, I agree with you. I think if we're gonna do a letter of support, I think the first person it probably needs to go to is Hoban, being North Dakota.
And if they say, as far as cooperation, we've been up and met with Fort Peck tribes. They've got the same letter. They'll be calling probably this week, and I'm sure they'll do a letter. They basically asked the Corps and Fish and Wildlife to leave their meeting about a year and a half ago, because there was 150 some comments that came in. 130 of them were from irrigators. Not a one of them supported this. And the tribe asked the Corps and the Fish and Wildlife, so what did you do on those 130 comments? Did you make any changes? And they just said no, and they asked the Corps and the Fish and Wildlife to leave the meeting and not come back till they changed their attitude. So I feel Dana Berwick and I and Buzz Matlin and you've got Terry Fleck from North Dakota. We're on that Mr. Rick thing with Missouri River Recovery Implementation Committee that's all up and down the Missouri. And we've tried to provide information, and we have worked. So people like you, Roosevelt County has wrote a big letter, and they've been communicating. So Richland County as well in Montana. So I think we've tried, and I worked for the government with NRCS for about 30 years till I retired, but I always know how budgets are. They're going to say, we don't have any new money. Well, I think out of that 17.4 million, that they could come up with a couple. Maybe it's over a period of a year or two, but I think they could come up with some money in there to move the eggs around a little.
Bo, I think one of the things Lindsay hit it right in the head. We need to hear back from WAS and Lewis and Clark, but just what jumped into my head is those other counties. Can we get a copy of those, Dick? Their letters maybe, so we can take a look at them and see what they wrote as letters of support?
Okay, I will try to, the Missouri River Council acted as a unified voice for the 4 counties, but I know Richland is going to write one out of Sidney and Roosevelt. So I will get those to, through Bo, or what would be the best way?
Yeah, if you forward it to me, and I can forward you, get Lindsay and you in contact together too, so that you can visit with her on. But I think,
Okay, I do have her email, the one you forwarded yesterday, so Lindsay
okay,
at County Williams. Yep, I got it.
yep,
I
So-
will work on that part, you bet. And when I get something for Port Peck Tribes, I will get that to you as well.
all right. So I think the goal would be to gather some more information and then probably have a letter put together for our March, what would it be, 19th? 19th meeting? Would that be appropriate, Dick?
You bet.
All right. So that's the goal. Any other questions from the board before we, thank you, Mr. Iverson. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Just-
folks.
just
You
one-
bet.
Just one quick question. I apologize. Dick, do you have, is it the, maybe asking you to step a little outside your area of expertise, but you obviously have been engaged in this, but is it the lack of oxygen in the water in that dead zone that you described around the Trenton area? Is that what they're suggesting is I mean, couldn't this be done a little simpler by just aerating the water and making sure there's oxygen in the water? There's lots of, just looking right now on the internet, and there's a lot of companies out there that offer that as a solution. But anyway, that seems like, why not a direct a solution to the problem other ways?
Well, yes, to answer your question, it is oxygen, and we've thought about that sitting at these meetings, but they've not, as far as I know, studied that or given us that information. But it's those little sturgeon, and they've got many videos that they show us about the sturgeon, how they float through the river and all that, and they just need to be able to swim, otherwise they sink.
Okay.
And so that would, if you could put oxygen in that river or get a channel where the river's flowing, maybe that would work.
Gotcha. Thank you.
They're a strange fish, and maybe I'll try to get some of those that Bo could show you, or I could come over, but they show those big old, and they're big ugly things. They take them down below Sakakawea. They catch most of them. There's about 60, 70 still alive that were, before Sakakawea was put in. They're 50, 60 years old. But anyway, they're like 5, 6 feet long, and they just travel really slow. That's why they had to build them a handicap ramp to get around intake. They're not like a salmon. And they'll go all the way up to Fort Peck, turn around, and then come back down and go up the Yellowstone. And one thing they don't like to talk about, but the males hang around just east of Fairview, kind of where the big old plain was. And for some reason, that's where they'll spawn. So in some ways, whatever they do, it isn't going to work unless they can continue to get fish to go up above intake and spawn around Miles City. I've taken a lot of your time, but you guys have some very good ideas or questions.
Okay, well, I think we got a little work to do. If there's no other questions, I guess we'll, anything from Steve or Barry? You have any other questions?
I'm good.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm good. I guess I would be definitely in support of coming up with something to help them out. That's for sure.
yeah, I would agree. Okay, well, if nobody has anything else for the good of the order, item F is adjournment. So looks like that's where we're at, and we'll adjourn at 8:33. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.